The rumble of Harleys echoed like distant thunder through the dusty outskirts of Blackridge, a forgotten town where the horizon bled into endless sagebrush. It was just past midnight when the explosion lit up the night sky, a fireball blooming from Tom's workshop like a vengeful sun. Flames licked the metal walls, devouring tools and memories in equal measure. Tom Reed, 42 years old, with grease-stained hands and a faded iron promise patch on his leather vest, staggered out into the cool air, his world fracturing in shards of orange and black. The blast had come from nowhere. A faulty gas line, they said later, but in that moment, it felt like fate's cruel punch. He collapsed against his bike, the world spinning into darkness, the acrid smell of burning rubber and singed hair filling his lungs. Inside the Iron Promise clubhouse, a weathered barn converted into a haven of chrome and camaraderie, the brothers gathered around a scarred oak table. Flickering neon from a Miller sign cast long shadows across their faces, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the faint tang of spilled whiskey. Tom had been one of them for 15 years, a quiet enforcer whose word was law, bound by oaths forged in the fires of lost wars and broken homes. But now he sat in the corner, staring blankly at his calloused hands as if they belonged to a stranger. The doctors called it retrograde amnesia, everything before the blast erased, leaving only fragments, the feel of throttle under his palm, the loyalty that pulsed like a second heartbeat. "Who am I?" he'd muttered that first night, his voice rough as gravel, and the club had closed ranks around him, their chosen family a shield against the void. The door creaked open then, letting in a gust of desert wind that rattled the empty bottles on the bar. A small figure slipped inside, silhouetted against the starry night. Elena, 9 years old, her dark hair tangled and her sneakers caked in mud. She clutched a frayed backpack like a lifeline, her wide eyes scanning the room with a mix of fear and determination. The bikers fell silent, their laughter dying as they took in the sight. A child alone, far too young for this rough-edged world. Bullies from the edge of town had cornered her earlier that evening, shoving her toward the shadows near the old rail yard, their taunts echoing off rusted boxcars. "Run home, squirt," they'd sneered, but home was ashes now, and Elena had nowhere else to turn. Terrified tears streaked her cheeks, but she wiped them away, standing tall in the doorway. Jax, the club's grizzled president with a salt-and-pepper beard and scars from a lifetime of rides, rose first. "Kid, you lost." His voice was a low rumble, not unkind, but laced with the wariness of men who'd seen too much trouble. The others shifted, hands instinctively near their belts, ready for whatever storm this might bring. Elena's gaze darted past them, locking onto Tom in the corner. He didn't look up, lost in his fog, fiddling with a chain necklace he'd found in his pocket, a simple silver lynx with a tiny locket, its clasp worn smooth. She took a hesitant step forward, the floorboards groaning under her weight, and the room held its breath. "You," she said, her voice small but steady, pointing directly at Tom. The bikers exchanged glances, confusion rippling through the group like a chill wind. Tom finally lifted his head, his blue eyes clouded, meeting hers without recognition. Who was this girl? A stranger's face in a sea of blanks. Elena swallowed hard, stepping closer, the scent of rain-dampened earth clinging to her clothes. "You always told stories before bed, because I was scared of the dark." The words hung in the air, simple and shattering, like a key turning in a rusted lock. The clubhouse went deathly quiet. Jax's chair scraped back as he leaned in, his face hardening. "What the hell does that mean, kid?" But Elena ignored him, her eyes never leaving Tom's. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled drawing. Stick figures on a motorcycle, a man with a beard holding a little girl's hand under a starry sky. "You saved me from the fire, the big one 2 years ago, our house. It was gone, You carried me out, and then you let me stay with you until they found my aunt." Her voice trembled now, but she pressed on, the memory alive in her while Tom's mind grasped at smoke. Tom's hand went to his temple, a flicker of something, pain, perhaps recognition, crossing his features. The explosion had stolen his past, but this child's words stirred echoes, nights of whispered tales about brave riders who chased away monsters, the warmth of a shared blanket in a trailer on the outskirts. The club watched, transfixed, as the pieces began to align. Iron Promise wasn't just bikes and brotherhood. It was promises kept, oaths that bound them tighter than blood. Tom had always been the one who remembered the forgotten, the protector of the lost, and now here was proof walking in on 2 feet. Elena crossed the room fully, standing before him, her small hand extended with the drawing. "You promised you'd always come back, even if the dark tried to take you." Tom's fingers brushed the paper, the locket in his pocket suddenly heavy. The brothers leaned in, the air electric with unspoken questions. Who was she to him? A niece, a foster charge from that hazy time before the blast. Rumors had swirled back then about a fire in the valley, a single dad lost in the flames, leaving a kid behind. But Tom had never spoken of it, burying the weight like so many others. Jax broke the silence, his voice gruff but gentle. "Tom, you know this girl." Tom shook his head slowly, but his eyes softened, tracing the lines of her face. "I don't remember, but she remembers me." Elena nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her gaze. The club erupted in murmurs, chairs shifting as they processed the impossible. A lost memory, a child's unyielding faith. It was the kind of bond that could rally 50 bikes on a midnight run, chasing justice through the dawn. As the first light of morning crept through the grimy windows, painting the room in gold, Tom stood, his hand finally closing around hers. The amnesia might hold his past captive, but promises, it seemed, had a way of breaking free. The Iron Promise revved to life that day, not for revenge or rumble, but for redemption, a ride to uncover truths long buried. With a little girl leading the way, the desert stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, but in that grip, a family reformed, silent vows echoing louder than any engine roar. The sun crested the jagged peaks of Blackridge's horizon, casting long shadows across the Iron Promise clubhouse lot, where a dozen Harleys stood like silent sentinels, their chrome catching the first rays in blinding flashes. Tom Reed released Elena's hand slowly, the warmth of her small palm lingering like a ghost on his skin. He knelt to her level, the gravel crunching under his boots, inhaling the faint scent of wild sage that clung to her backpack. The girl's eyes, dark and unyielding, searched his face for the man she knew, the one who'd pulled her from choking smoke 2 years back when flames had claimed her world in a single, merciless night. But to Tom, she was a puzzle piece from a box he'd never opened, her words stirring only a dull ache behind his eyes, like pressure building before a storm. Jax clapped a heavy hand on Tom's shoulder, his grip firm enough to ground the moment. "All right, brothers," he rumbled, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife through leather. "This ain't just some stray kid wandering in. Tom's got history here, even if he don't see it yet." The club nodded, a ripple of agreement passing among them, veterans like Marcus with his prosthetic arm from a desert skirmish long past, and Lena, the only woman in the patch, a former nurse who'd traded scrubs for a vest after losing her squad to a corrupt system. They were bound by more than ink on leather. Iron Promise was forged in the quiet oaths of survival, the kind that pulled you from the brink when blood family couldn't. Elena tugged at Tom's sleeve, her voice a whisper against the growing hum of engines warming up outside. "You had a scar here," she said, tracing a faint line on his forearm, hidden under the rolled cuff of his shirt. "From lifting the beam off me. It hurt, but you laughed and said scars were badges for heroes." Tom's brow furrowed, the touch igniting a spark. Not memory exactly, but instinct, like the pull of a throttle he couldn't recall gripping. He glanced at the locket around his neck, now dangling openly. Inside, a faded photo of a child smiling, edges curled from time. Where had that come from? The workshop blast had erased timelines, but objects like this one whispered secrets his mind refused to hear. The group moved to the scarred oak table, pulling up mismatched chairs that scraped like bones on stone. Jax spread a crumpled map of the valley, its lines faded but familiar, marking the old trailer park where Elena's fire had raged. "Kid says you took her in after," he explained, eyeing her with a mix of suspicion and softness. "Till her aunt showed up from out east. But that aunt, word is, she vanished last month, leaving Elena with nothing but echoes." Elena nodded, fiddling with the drawing in her lap, the stick-figure rider now seeming prophetic in the morning light. Bullies had chased her from the foster home's edge, but deeper shadows loomed, rumors of shady developers eyeing the land, pushing out the forgotten with threats veiled as progress. Tom leaned forward, the wood cool under his elbows as fragments teased him. A child's laughter echoing in a cramped trailer. The sizzle of pancakes on a hot plate, stories spun from the saddlebags of his life, tales of riders who outran storms, not with speed, but with heart. I feel it," he admitted, his voice gravelly, unused to vulnerability. "Like a road I can't map." Marcus grunted in approval, sliding a mug of black coffee his way, steam rising like desert mist. "That's how it starts, brother. Oaths don't fade, they wait." The club shared nods, their chosen bonds a fortress against the amnesia's void. Lena knelt by Elena, offering a granola bar from her pocket, her eyes sharp. "You safe now, little one? No one's taken you back to that mess." But as the conversation deepened, a low rumble interrupted. The growl of an unmarked SUV pulling up outside, dust billowing in its wake. The driver, a slick-suited man with a badge glinting falsely on his lapel, stepped out, flanked by two enforcers in plain clothes. Local authority, the kind that bent rules for the highest bidder, here to check on the disturbance, reported from the rail yard. Jax's jaw tightened, rising to meet them at the door, the club's tension coiling like a spring. "We're just having a family talk," he said flatly, blocking the threshold. The lead man smirked, eyes flicking to Elena inside. "That kid's got a file, unclaimed. We're here to relocate her, proper channels." Elena's face paled, clutching Tom's arm as if he were the anchor she'd lost. The word relocate hung heavy, laced with the corruption that Iron Promise had fought before, systems that shuffled the vulnerable like cards in a rigged game. Tom stood instinctively, a protective shadow falling over her, his forgotten promise surging through the fog. "She's staying," he growled, the words surprising even him, born from a loyalty deeper than recall. The suited man laughed, cold and echoing. "You don't even know who you are, Reed. Amnesia don't make you her guardian." But Tom's gaze hardened, the locket warm against his chest, a silent vow, reigniting. The standoff stretched, the air thick with unspoken threats, until Jax stepped forward, his presence a wall of weathered steel. "Iron Promise don't forget its own, and she claims him. That's enough for us." The enforcers shifted, hands twitching, but the club's eyes, dozens now gathering at the windows, held them at bay. No rumble of fists, just the unyielding weight of honor, a moral line drawn in the dust. The man backed off, muttering about warrants and follow-ups, his SUV kicking gravel as it retreated into the haze. Back inside, the breath released collectively, chairs scraping as they regrouped. Elena looked up at Tom, her small hand in his once more. "You came back, just like you said." He squeezed gently, the ache in his head sharpening into resolve. The blast had taken his past, but this child, this club, they were piecing it forward. As engines fired up for a scouting run to the old trailer site, the desert wind whispered of truths waiting, promises that outlasted fire and forgetfulness. The ride ahead promised not just answers, but redemption's quiet roar. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The desert road unfurled like a scarred vein under the midday sun, heat waves shimmering off the asphalt as the Iron Promise convoy cut through the haze. Tom's Harley led the pack, its engine a steady thrum that vibrated through his bones, syncing with the pulse he couldn't quite place, a rhythm from nights long erased. Elena rode pillion behind Jack's, her arms wrapped tight around his waist, the wind whipping her hair into a dark banner. She glanced back at Tom every few miles, her face a mask of quiet trust amid the roar, as if willing the memories to surface with each passing cactus silhouette. The club followed in tight formation, Marcus on his customized chopper, Lena scouting the flanks on her sleek Sportster, and a dozen more brothers filling the rear, their vests gleaming like badges of unyielding oath. Blackridge's outskirts gave way to the forgotten fringes, where rusted trailers squatted like abandoned dreams, their metal skins warped by years of relentless wind. The old trailer park loomed ahead, a graveyard of twisted frames and overgrown weeds, the air thick with the dry scent of baked earth and faint, lingering char. 2 years ago, this place had been hell's doorstep, flames erupting from Elena's home in a blaze sparked by faulty wiring, or so the reports claimed. But whispers among the locals spoke of deeper shadows, landlords cutting corners, ignoring pleas for repairs until the inevitable struck. Tom slowed his bike, the gravel crunching as they dismounted, the sudden silence amplifying the distant cry of a hawk wheeling overhead. Elena slid off Jax's ride, her sneakers kicking up dust as she pointed toward a charred skeleton of a trailer at the edge. "That was ours," she said, voice steady but laced with the echo of old fear. "You broke the door down. The smoke was everywhere like black monsters." Tom approached cautiously, his boots sinking into the soft ground, a strange pull tugging at his gut. He knelt by the remnants, fingers tracing the blackened beams, the wood still brittle and ashen. No full recall came, but flashes teased, the heat of inferno on his face, a child's cough cutting through the crackle, his arms straining under debris. The locket at his neck swung free, catching the sun, and he flipped it open again, the photo inside now seeming less foreign, the child's smile a faint mirror of Elena's. Jack scanned the perimeter, his eyes narrowing at fresh tire tracks cutting through the weeds, too clean for this forsaken spot. "Someone's been here recent," he muttered, signaling Marcus to check the far side. The club spread out, a silent patrol born of instincts honed in tighter binds than law. Lena stayed close to Elena, her hand on the girl's shoulder, the nurse's touch a quiet anchor. "What happened after you saved her?" Lena asked softly as they walked the site's edge. Elena hesitated, kicking a pebble that skittered into the brush. "You fixed up the trailer next door, made it safe, told me about your club, how they ride for the lost ones. But then the men came, said the land was changing hands." Tom's head snapped up at her words, a fragment solidifying, suited figures in the twilight, clipboards in hand, voices smooth as oil promising relocation benefits, while eyes gleamed with profit. He'd stood firm then, just as now, the amnesia cracking like dry earth under pressure. The explosion at his workshop, had it been accident or retaliation? Rumors from the clubhouse spoke of developers circling Blackridge, buying out the vulnerable, silencing objections with veiled threats. Iron Promise had tangled with them before, oaths clashing against greed's cold machinery. As Marcus returned, holding a discarded envelope fluttering in the breeze, addressed to Elena M. Caretaker Unknown, the pieces sharpened. Inside, a faded notice, eviction pending, dated months before the aunt's disappearance. The wind picked up, carrying the faint whine of engines approaching from the horizon. The convoy tensed, hands drifting to handlebars. But it was no rival club, just a dusty pickup rattling into view, an old-timer at the wheel, his face weathered like canyon rock. He killed the engine, stepping out with a wary nod to Jax. "Heard the rumble. Figured it was you folks poking around." His name was Harlan, a park holdout who'd watched the fire that night. "Reed was a ghost in the machine back then," he said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Pulled the kid out, no questions. Took her in when no one else would, but those land sharks, they don't forget a stand like that." Harlan's eyes flicked to Tom, heavy with unspoken debt. "Explosion at your shop? Smells like their handiwork. Faulty line, my ass." Elena edged closer to Tom, her small frame brushing his leg, the contact grounding him amid the rising storm in his mind. "You promised no one would take our home," she whispered, her words a bridge across the void. Tom's jaw clenched, the ache behind his eyes blooming into clarity. Not full light, but enough to see the path. He'd been her shield once, a silent guardian weaving stories to banish shadows, fulfilling a vow born in chaos. The club gathered around Harlan, voices low as he sketched the players. A shadowy firm called Valley Forge Developments, fronts for bigger corruption, preying on the forgotten to pave paradise for condos and cash. Jax's face darkened, the president's resolve hardening like forged steel. "We ride for promises, old man. Tom's one of ours, hers too now." Harlan nodded, a spark of alliance in his gaze, and slipped them a crumpled business card from his pocket, the name Victor Hale etched in gold. "The lead dog," he said, "the one who'd vanished Elena's aunt after she fought the buyout. No violence in their code, but truth had a way of rumbling louder than thunder." As the sun dipped lower, painting the ruins in crimson, Tom lifted Elena onto his bike's seat, her weight familiar in ways his mind denied. "We'll find her," he said, the words tasting like oath renewed. "And the rest." The convoy fired up again, engines growling defiance as they peeled out, leaving the trailer park's ghosts to settle. Dust trailed them like a banner of intent, the desert swallowing their path toward Blackridge's underbelly. Amnesia might veil the past, but loyalty carved it clear, a chosen family rolling toward justice, one silent promise at a time. The road ahead twisted with shadows, but in Elena's quiet grip on his vest, Tom felt the first true stir of who he'd been, a rider who didn't break his word, even to himself. The engine's growl softened to a low purr as the Iron Promise convoy crested the final rise into Blackridge's frayed heart, the town sprawling like a faded photograph under the relentless afternoon glare. Dust devils danced along the roadside, swirling red earth that stung Tom's eyes as he gripped the handlebars tighter. Elena's absence on his bike, a hollow echo now that she'd switched to Lena's for the return leg. The girl's laughter had cut through the wind earlier, a sound that tugged at invisible threads in his chest. Stories of desert nights, he'd bet, the kind he'd spun to chase away her nighttime fears. But with each mile, the fragments sharpened, not just echoes, but shapes forming in the fog. The Lockett's photo now burned into his mind like a brand. They pulled into the clubhouse lot, the Harleys settling into their spots with mechanical sighs, chrome cooling in the shade of the overhanging barn roof. Jax killed his engine last, swinging a leg over as he scanned the horizon, his salt and pepper beard dusted with the ride's grit. "Hale's card points to that strip mall on Elm. Fancy office, all glass and lies," he said, voice low as the others dismounted, forming a loose circle amid the scent of hot metal and cooling rubber. Marcus nodded, flexing his prosthetic with a metallic click, while Lena helped Elena down, the girl's sneakers hitting gravel with a soft crunch. Harlan's words lingered like smoke. Valley Forge wasn't just buying land, they were erasing lives, the aunts vanishing a thread in a web of silenced voices. Tom lingered by his bike, tracing the worn iron promise patch on his vest, the leather warm under his fingers. The amnesia clawed at him, but the trailer's ruins had stirred more, a visceral pull, like the memory of lifting a beam, muscles screaming, a child's gasp in the haze. "Victor Hale," he murmured, the name tasting bitter, unfamiliar, yet laced with old rage. Elena sidled up, her small hand slipping into his, the contact electric. "You said bad men hide behind papers, but riders see through them," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the club's unyielding resolve. He squeezed back, the gesture instinctive, a promise resurfacing without fanfare. Inside, the scarred oak table became command central again, the map unrolled with fresh marks. Elm Street circled in red, notes scribbled on Harlan's intel. Hale's firm had muscled out half the valley, evictions masked as urban renewal, but whispers of threats and worse shadowed their deals. Jax tapped the spot, his ring clinking against the wood. "We don't storm in guns blazing. Iron promise rides for truth, not blood." The brothers murmured agreement, Lena pouring coffee from a dented pot, steam curling like desert ghosts. Elena sat perched on a stool, sketching idly on a napkin, bikes circling a shadowed figure. Her art a quiet map of trust, but as plans took shape, a subtle recon, tailing Hale's movements without drawing heat, the door banged open, admitting a whirlwind of urgency. It was Riley, a young prospect with windburned cheeks and a fresh patch, his breath ragged from a sprint across town. "Boss! Trouble at the diner!" he panted, hands on knees, the air shifting with his words. "That SUV from earlier, same suits. They're grilling the waitress about the kid, flashing fake badges. Said something about welfare checks and unfit guardians." Elena's face drained of color, her pencil snapping in her grip, and Tom felt the fog recede further, a surge of protector's fire igniting where memories should be. Jax was on his feet in an instant, the club's energy coiling like a spring. "Mount up, quiet ride, no noise." They moved as one, a silent exodus to the lot. Engines started with muffled twists, the convoy slipping out like shadows at dusk. The diner squatted on the town's edge, neon flickering, open 24/7, in weary blue, its parking lot cracked and sparse under sodium lamps, just igniting against the fading light. The unmarked SUV idled there, exhaust curling lazily, while the suits loomed inside, their voices muffled through the grease-smeared windows, probing, pressing, the waitress's face tight with fear as she wiped counters that didn't need it. Tom parked at the tree line, the group fanning out on foot, boots silent on parched grass. He crouched low, Elena shielded behind Lena, watching as the lead suit, slick hair, gold watch glinting, leaned over the counter, his tone oily. The girl's aunt owed debts, Reed's involvement, convenient timing for that workshop boom. The words hit Tom like shrapnel, piecing the blast shadow. Not fate, but sabotage, a warning to back off the land grab 2 years cold. His hand clenched around the locket, the photo inside now a talisman, the aunt's fight mirroring his own forgotten stand. No confrontation erupted. Iron promises code held firm, justice in exposure, not fists. Jax signaled a retreat, but as they melted back, Riley snapped a photo with his phone, the flash a ghost in the dim. Back at the bikes, hearts pounding with restrained fury, Tom knelt before Elena again, the diner's lights casting her face in stark relief. "They won't touch you," he vowed, the words solid, born from the core the amnesia couldn't touch. She nodded, fierce, and hugged him tight, the embrace unlocking another shard. Bedtime whispers, her head on his shoulder, tales of unbreakable oaths weaving safety from strands of night. The convoy returned under twilight's veil, the sky bruising purple as they debriefed. Hale's web tangled deeper, the aunt likely coerced into silence, her disappearance a relocation to nowhere. Tom's mind raced, flashes coalescing, the fire's true spark, perhaps tampered lines to clear the park. His workshop, collateral in a grudge. The club rallied, oaths renewed in nods and grips, their chosen family a bulwark against corruption's tide. Lena bandaged a minor scrape from the brush, nothing more than a reminder of vigilance, while Marcus plotted digital trails on an old laptop, unearthing shell companies linked to Hale. As night deepened, stars pricking the black canvas overhead, Tom stepped outside alone, the cool air carrying the faint howl of coyotes. Elena joined him, wordless, her presence a bridge. "You remember now?" she asked softly, hand in his. "Bits," he admitted, the locket cool against his skin. "Enough to ride." The promise pulsed between them, silent and profound, a legacy of honor, pulling him from the void toward dawn's reckoning. Valley Forge's shadows loomed, but iron promise rolled on, loyalty's engine unyielding, carving justice from the dark. If this tale of forgotten vows and unbreakable bonds is stirring something in you, smash that like button below. It helps spread these stories of quiet heroism far and wide. The moon hung low over Blackridge like a tarnished silver coin, its pale light filtering through the clubhouse's cracked shutters, casting elongated shadows across the scarred oak table. Tom sat at the edge, the wooden surface rough under his palms as the Iron Promise brothers huddled closer, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee and oiled leather. Elena had curled up in an armchair nearby, her eyelids drooping after the day's relentless pull, but her presence lingered like a quiet flame, warming the room against the chill of unfolding truths. Marcus's laptop screen glowed faintly, its blue hue illuminating his focused scowl as lines of code and public records scrolled by, shell companies unraveling like frayed ropes, all tracing back to Victor Hale's Valley Forge empire. Jax paced slowly, his boots thudding softly on the worn floorboards, each step a measured beat in the club's growing resolve. "Hale's not just grabbing land," he said, the voice a low gravel rumble that cut through the tension. "He's burying the fights against it. That Aunt Maria, right, kid?" Elena nodded sleepily from her perch, her voice a murmur. "She promised to come back for me. Said we'd fix the park together." The words hung, simple yet piercing, echoing the oaths that bound the Iron Promise. Promises that didn't bend under pressure, no matter the cost. Tom's fingers traced the locket absent-mindedly, the metal now familiar, its weight a constant reminder of the void it bridged. Flashes came unbidden now, Maria's face in the trailer doorway, weary but fierce, handing over guardianship papers with a nod of trust, her eyes saying what words couldn't, keep her safe. Lena leaned against the bar, arms crossed over her vest, her nurse's instincts sharpening her gaze. If they're silencing folks like her, it's more than eviction notices, coercion, maybe worse, pressuring until they vanish. She glanced at Elena, softening. "We find her, we break the chain." The club murmured assent, a ripple of loyalty passing like a shared breath. Tom felt it too, a surge in his chest that overrode the amnesia's fog, not memory, but conviction, the kind forged in the heat of unseen battles. He'd stood for Maria once. He sensed it now, bartering his quiet life to shield her niece from the encroaching shadows of progress that cared nothing for the vulnerable. Outside, the night wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the faint metallic tang of distant rain. Marcus tapped the keys, pulling up a grainy photo from an old town archive. Maria at a community meeting, fist raised against a backdrop of suits, her expression unyielding. Last sighting, 3 months back, arguing buyout terms at the council hall. Then nothing, phone disconnected, address empty. Tom's jaw tightened, a fragment solidifying, a late-night call from her, voice strained over static, begging for help against the wolves in ties. The workshop explosion replayed in his mind's eye, not as accident, but sabotage. A cut line, a timed spark, payback for meddling in Hale's game. The developers had played long, waiting out the aunt, then striking at the man who'd harbored her charge. Jax halted his pacing, leaning over the map, his finger jabbing Elm Street's heart. Tomorrow, we ride subtle, scout Hale's office at dawn, before the suits swarm. No badges, no noise, just eyes and ears. The plan sketched out in nods and shorthand. Lena and Riley on foot, blending as locals, Marcus hacking feeds from a van, Tom and Jax circling the block, ready to extract if heat rose. Elena stirred, rubbing her eyes, her small voice cutting the strategy like a clear bell. You told me once, stories end with the good ones winning quiet. No big fights, just right choices. Tom met her gaze, the words unlocking another shard. Her tucked under his arm in the trailer's dim light, his voice weaving tales of riders who turned back the dark with honor alone. Yeah, he replied softly, the first full smile cracking his features since the blast. That's how it goes. As the meeting broke, the club dispersed to bunks and watches, the clubhouse settling into a vigilant hush. Tom stepped onto the porch, the cool night air brushing his face like a forgotten touch, stars wheeling overhead in indifferent vastness. Elena followed, slipping her hand into his, the gesture now routine, a thread pulling him from isolation. Do you see her yet? In your head, she asked, tilting her face up, moonlight silvering her features. He hesitated, the locket opening in his free hand, the photo's child now unmistakably her, younger, but the eyes the same. Starting to, like road signs in the dust. They stood there, the desert's silence amplifying their bond, a chosen family mending what time and trauma had torn. But peace shattered with the crunch of tires on gravel, a lone figure on a motorcycle, not iron promise, pulling up hesitant at the lot's edge. The rider killed the engine, helmet off, revealing a woman's face etched with worry. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, clothes rumpled from a long haul. "Read!" she called, voice tentative, stepping into the porchlight. Jax emerged from the shadows, and raised in caution, but Tom froze, a jolt racing through him. Maria, alive but changed, eyes hollow, a faint bruise shadowing her jaw, vestiges of pressure long endured. I heard about the explosion, came as soon as I could. The club converged, a protective circle forming without a word as she crossed the threshold. Elena gasped, launching forward into her aunt's arms. The reunion a quiet sob against the night. Maria held her tight, tears streaking dust from her cheeks, then looked to Tom, gratitude raw in her gaze. You kept your word, even when they tried to make you forget. Jax guided her inside, the door closing softly behind, sealing the moment from prying eyes. Over mugs of warmed coffee, her story spilled in fragments. Hale's men had cornered her after the meeting, offers turning to threats, debts fabricated, isolation enforced, until she signed away the park's remnants. She'd fled east, hiding in shadows, but Elena's trail led her back. Whispers of the club's rumble drawing her home. Tom listened, the pieces locking, the fire's spark from neglected lines, his stand that marked him, the blast a final push to scatter the resistance. No graphic scars detailed, just the weight of survival's toll. They think I'm broken, he said, voice steady now, the amnesia yielding to purpose. But promises don't break. Maria nodded, her hand on Elena's head. You saved us both once, now we finish it together. The iron promise closed ranks tighter, oaths intertwining with this new thread. Family reclaimed, loyalty's fire stoked against corruption's chill. Dawn crept in hours later, painting the horizon in soft pinks as the convoy prepared to roll. Engines hummed to life, a symphony of resolve, the desert road calling them toward Hale's domain. Tom mounted his Harley, Elena waving from the porch with Maria, their figures small but fierce in the growing light. The ride promised confrontation, not of fists, but truth, a moral dawn breaking over Blackridge's hidden wars, where forgotten vows roared back to life. The first blush of dawn painted the Blackridge skyline in hues of rose and gold, the desert air crisp with the promise of a new day as the Iron Promise convoy thrummed to life. Tom's Harley vibrated beneath him, the familiar growl sinking with the steady beat of his heart, now unclouded by the thickest fog of amnesia. Elena and Maria stood on the clubhouse porch, the girl's small hand waving in the strengthening light, her aunt's arm around her shoulders like a shield forged overnight. Tom's gaze lingered on them for a beat, the locket at his neck a quiet talisman, its photo now a clear window to the past, nights of stories shared, a makeshift family pieced together from ashes. He nodded once, a silent vow exchanged, before twisting the throttle, leading the pack into the awakening world. The road to Elm Street wound through sparse suburbs, where chain-link fences rattled in the breeze, and early commuters blinked sleep from their eyes. Jax rode flank, his presence a steady anchor, while Lena and Riley peeled off toward the strip mall's rear alleys on foot, their boots silent on dew-kissed pavement. Marcus trailed in a nondescript van, laptop humming with digital eyes scanning security feeds. The air carried the faint scent of blooming creosote, mingling with the rich exhaust of the bikes, a sensory map guiding them toward confrontation. Tom's mind raced ahead, fragments fully assembled now, the fire's insidious origin, tampered wiring to hasten the park's clearance, his quiet defiance that drew Hale's gaze, the workshop blast, a calculated strike to erase the meddler. No rage boiled unchecked, only the cool resolve of a promise kept, loyalty's engine driving him forward. The strip mall emerged like a mirage of false prosperity, its glass facade reflecting the rising sun in sharp glints, parking lots still shadowed and empty, save for a few early deliveries. Valley Forge's office occupied the corner suite, blinds half-drawn, the sign gleaming with polished arrogance. Tom eased his bike to a stop across the street, hidden by a row of overgrown junipers, the club's formation fanning out like ghosts in the mist. Jax dismounted first, his boots crunching gravel softly, signaling the all-clear with a subtle hand gesture. Eyes open, brothers. We walk in with words, walk out with truth. The group nodded, vests zipped against the chill, their steps measured as they crossed the lot, the scent of fresh asphalt rising to meet them. Inside, the lobby hummed with artificial calm. Cool air scented with lemon polish, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like distant bees. The receptionist glanced up from her desk, her smile faltering at the sight of weathered leather and determined faces. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice thin. Jax leaned on the counter, his tone even. "Victor Hale. Tell him Iron Promise is here to talk land, and lives." Her eyes widened, fingers hovering over the phone, but before she could dial, the inner door swung open. Hale emerged mid-40s, impeccably suited, his smile a veneer over steel, hair slicked, cufflinks flashing like false stars. Flanked by two associates, he sized them up, the air thickening with unspoken power plays. "Read," Hale said, his voice smooth as oiled chrome, eyes narrowing on Tom. "Heard about your mishap, workshop's a shame, come to settle old scores." Tom stepped forward, the lobby's echo amplifying his gravelly reply. "Not scores, promises. Elena's aunt, Maria. You buried her fight under threats and shadows." Hale's facade cracked slightly, a flicker of calculation crossing his features as Maria's name hung between them. The associates shifted, hands in pockets, but the club's unyielding circle held firm. No advances, just the weight of gathered truths. From the van outside, Marcus's voice crackled softly in Jax's earpiece. "Feeds show empty back rooms. No heat yet." Hale chuckled, low and dismissive, gesturing to a conference room with its wall of tinted windows overlooking the empty lot. Promises. This is business. The valley needs progress. Condos, jobs, folks like Maria. They get in the way, sign or step aside. They filed in, the door clicking shut, the space sterile with the scent of fresh printer ink and stale ambition. Tom laid the locket on the table, its photo facing Hale, Elena's young face a silent accusation. You sparked that fire to clear the park. Pressed her till she broke. My shop? Your warning shot. Hale's eyes darted to the image, then away, his composure fraying like worn tread. Allegations without proof. I build, you ride fantasies. But the door to the adjacent office creaked, and Lena slipped in from the service hall, Riley at her heels, a slim folder in her grasp, pilfered files from an unlocked drawer, and timestamps matching Harlan's intel. She slid it across the table, pages whispering open to reveal forged debt notices, emails laced with coercion, the aunt's coerced signature circled in red. Proof, Jax rumbled, the word landing like a dropped wrench. Hale's face paled, the associates exchanging uneasy glances as the reality settled. Not a rumble of bikes, but a revelation that could unravel empires. No fists flew, the moral blade cut deeper, exposing the corruption that preyed on the vulnerable underguises of law. Hale leaned back, the chair creaking under him, his voice dropping to a hiss. You think this ends it? Valley Forge has friends in high places, councils, badges. Tom met his gaze, unflinching. The amnesia's remnants now fuel for clarity. We don't need to end you, just the lies. Maria's coming forward. Elena's safe. Your web's torn. The developer's empire teetered in that moment. The weight of oaths, Tom's to the girl, the club's to justice, pressing down like the desert's unyielding sun. Hale waved a hand, feigning nonchalance, but his eyes betrayed the fracture. Calls would be made, deals renegotiated, the land grab's shadows fleeing the light. As the iron promise filed out, the lobby air felt lighter, the dawn's warmth seeping through the glass. Bikes waited like loyal steeds, engines firing with a collective roar that echoed through them all, a declaration without violence. Tom paused at the threshold, glancing back at Hale's retreating form, the promise fulfilled in quiet triumph. Back on the road, the convoy cut toward the clubhouse, wind whipping past, as fragments of normalcy returned, Elena's face in his mind, Maria's grateful nod, awaiting. But whispers on the breeze hinted at ripples. Hale's desperation might summon one last shadow, a final test of bonds before full redemption dawned. The desert stretched endless, but loyalty's path led true, carving honor from the haze. The sun climbed higher over Blackridge, turning the desert road into a ribbon of molten gold as the Iron Promise convoy sliced through the morning haze. Tom's Harley led the way, its engine a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through his frame, syncing with the steady rhythm of clarity now flooding his veins. The amnesia's fog had lifted like mist under the sun's glare, memories cascading back in vivid bursts. The crackle of flames 2 years past, Elena's small cough piercing the smoke, Maria's grateful embrace in the trailer's dim glow. He'd been her rock then, a lone rider stepping into the breach, weaving bedtime tales of unbreakable oaths to shield her from the night's grasp. The locket swung freely at his neck. No longer a mystery, but a badge of vows kept, its silver warmed by the rising light. Jax rode close behind, his bike's growl a steadfast echo, the salt and pepper beard on his face catching the wind like a banner of unyielding resolve. The club followed in tight formation, Marcus on his chopper, prosthetic arm glinting. Lena scouting the flanks, her sportster cutting clean lines. The others, a thunderous phalanx of loyalty, vests patched with the Iron Promise emblem that meant more than ink. The strip mall faded in the rear view, Hale's empire cracked but not shattered yet. The pilfered files a seed of truth planted deep. No shots fired, no roads blocked, just exposure, the quiet justice that outlasted greed's fleeting roar. The air rushed past, carrying the sharp tang of sage and sun-baked earth, a sensory promise of homecoming as the clubhouse loomed on the horizon, its weathered barn a sanctuary etched against the sky. They pulled into the lot in a swirl of dust, engines winding down to silence, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant call of a mourning dove. Elena burst from the porch first, her sneakers pounding the gravel, dark hair flying as she launched into Tom's arms the moment he dismounted. "You did it," she breathed, her face buried in his vest, the scent of wildflowers clinging to her from the morning's weight. Maria followed, her steps measured but lighter now, the hollows under her eyes softened by relief. She clasped Tom's hand, her grip firm, eyes meeting his with the weight of shared survival. "The shadows are lifting," she said softly, her voice carrying the faint lilt of eastern roads she'd traversed in hiding. The club encircled them, a chosen family closing ranks, Jax's nod to Maria sealing her into their fold without a word. Inside, the scarred oak table bore fresh marks, notes from the recon scribbled in hasty ink. The folder of files spread open like a map to reckoning. Lena poured steaming coffee from the dented pot, its rich aroma mingling with the faint leather polish of the room, while Marcus synced his laptop to a projector scavenged from the clubhouse stores. The screen flickered to life, casting blue light across weathered faces, emails chaining Hale to fabricated debts, blueprints overlaying the trailer park with sterile condos, timestamps linking the workshop blast to a subcontracted maintenance crew. "It's airtight," Marcus grunted, his voice a low rumble of satisfaction. "Council'll have to look now. No burying this under progress." Tom sat beside Elena, her small hand in his, as the pieces wove fully into place. He remembered it all now, the fire's insidious spark, wires frayed by neglect to hasten eviction, his stand at Maria's side refusing the buyout's poison, the quiet nights fostering Elena, stories spun from saddlebag lore to banish her fears. The explosion had been Hale's desperate swing, aiming to erase the witness who'd harbored the fight, but promises endured, etched deeper than scars, pulling him back from the void. "We ride for the forgotten," Jack said, his words a creed echoing through the room, the brothers raising mugs in silent toast. No vengeance burned, only the moral fire of truth, illuminating corruption's underbelly for all to see. Words spread like dust on the wind. Harlan arrived first, his pickup rattling in by noon, eyes wide at the files. "You've stirred the hornets," he said, but his grin betrayed hope, the old-timer's tobacco-stained fingers tracing the evidence. Locals trickled in after, whispers from the diner and rail yard drawing them, waitresses with folded arms, veterans nodding in quiet alliance, a web of the overlooked knitting tighter around Valley Forge. By afternoon, a council rep showed, badge genuine this time, her face paling at the proofs laid bare. Hale's calls had come, blustering, but the tide turned, investigations promised, deals frozen, the aunt's coerced silence unraveling into testimony. As evening draped the desert in twilight's velvet, Tom stepped outside with Elena and Maria, the porch creaking under their weight. The sky bloomed with stars. The same canopy he'd pointed out during those lost nights, naming constellations as guardians against the dark. "You kept coming back," Elena said, her voice awed, leaning against him as coyotes yipped in the distance. Maria smiled, the bruise's shadow faded, her hand on her niece's shoulder. "We all did. Family isn't born, it's ridden." Tom nodded, the locket tucked away now, its purpose fulfilled. A bridge crossed, a legacy secured in honor's quiet glow. The club gathered one last time that night, engines silent but spirits revving, sharing stories around the flickering neon. Iron Promise had rolled through fire and forgetfulness, emerging whole, their oaths a beacon against the cynical grind. Hale's empire would crumble under scrutiny's weight. The valley spared for those who'd held the line. Tom felt the pull of the road still, but now with anchors, Elena's laughter, Maria's trust, the brothers' unbreakable bond. Redemption wasn't a blaze, but a steady dawn, promises blooming in the dust they'd stirred. In the end, Blackridge breathed easier, its hidden wars yielding to light. The convoy would ride again, for the next lost soul. But for now, they stood as one, loyalty's roar echoing into the night, a family chosen, vows eternal. Thank you for joining this journey of forgotten promises and unbreakable bonds. If these stories of quiet courage move you, hit that subscribe button and join the Iron Promise family for more tales from the road.